This is Create the Next from ProCFO Partners, where every week we explore strategies and ideas for financial management and growth to help today's businesses put their financial picture in context.
Welcome back to Create the Next. I'm Chris Bintliff. Vaughn Henson is back with us again. Vaughn, it's great to see you. And we're joined by a special guest, Steve Baker. Steve is the Vice President of the Great Game of Business, which taps into the universal human need to win. Yes, it does. In order to help organizations reach their highest potential. He's a co-author of Get in the Game, the 20th anniversary edition of The Great Game of Business. He's a best-selling author, speaker, coach. He's amazing. Vaughn is a pro CFO. He's an expert in open book coaching, which we're going to get into. He's done everything from leading companies to sitting on boards and chairing national industry councils. And he's a certified financial literacy coach. Gents, nice to see you. Welcome. Steve, I'm going to throw it to you first. What is open book management? Why would I want to do this? How is it different from what I'm used to? How is there an advantage for me thinking about it? It's a whole new concept for me. Help me understand.
No, I love it, Chris. Well, first of all, I'd like to say that you hit on it the right way. What is open book management? Because we're known as the birthplace of open book management at the Great Game of Business, and we think it's a misnomer. In other words, it infers, Chris, that if we gather up all of your people and throw the financials out on a table, someone's going to care. And that is not the case. First of all, they don't even know your language, right? And so open book management, let's change that and say, instead, what if we were to invite people to understand more about how an organization makes money and generates cash? The two objectives of any organization, for profit or not. If you don't do those two things, you're out. So now we can say, wow, if you understood more about how we actually make money and generate cash and how you help those numbers get better, well, by golly, we could actually throw more to the bottom line and create a self-funding incentive plan. So for me, it's really about engaging people to the financial outcomes of their daily work, because they're the ones that create the financials. It's not Vaughn Henson and the CFO, right? That is, in fact, the numbers flow the opposite way of what the average American thinks. They think accounting gives all this stuff out and then it happens. No, it's the people executing, whether they're writing code or selling windows or turning a wrench. I mean, the fact is they either add or subtract to the financial outcomes of the business every single day. All we're doing is reconnecting people to that.
So the status quo, Steve, is, 8 executives sit in a room and they figure it all out. And then they will trickle down some sort of strategy or meaning, or the reviews or the numbers are down to managers who will trickle it down to somebody. And the person turning the wrench eventually gets to them and they have no concept of what it means or why it matters or if their wrench turning is important. And you're saying, do it the other way. Start with the guy turning the wrench so he understands the importance of his job, why it matters, and make sure that the whole organization is in step with that so that we care more collectively about this reality of our business. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's great, Chris. Honestly,
okay,
for someone who just told me they'd never heard of it, it's pretty awesome.
So,
wait,
Vaughn,
do you need work?
Yes, I'm now accepting invitations. Vaughn, this connects to something that you and I have talked about before, and we've talked about with several pro CFOs, which is financial literacy. So this sounds really good in theory, but I don't get it. Like, I'm not, P&L doesn't mean a thing to me. Like, cash management sounds like something that the CFO should think about. I'm just over here turning wrenches. How important is it, one, financial literacy, and two, that there's an approach to that is on a human level, not a intellectual level, but on a, let's all basically understand. Where does that fit?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I like to approach it first on the what not to do, and that's hide behind buzzwords and accounting jargon. No one cares. Maybe if you're at a accounting conference, you can come up with a new way to capture deferred tax revenue or expense, but no one else cares. Your team's going to want to know what the bottom line is, and in particular, what their actions do to increase or decrease that bottom line. So I always look at it in terms of know your audience. And that's why I think it takes such a strategic CFO to be part of either an open book company or a company that's going through a transition because this is a big culture shift in many cases, like you're pointing out. So have a strategic minded CFO, one that's open-minded, and one that is a good communicator, because you're not just dealing with, maybe in the past you dealt with people that saw the financials all the time. They understood some of the nuances. You're now talking to people, and you need to meet them where they're at, your operations team, your production team, your sales team, et cetera. Now, I like to think of an example if I had a friend once teach me how to weld. So I have a little welder here in the house. I do little projects. I just thought welding, no problem. Put a stick, it happens. But he started going into the science and the metallurgy of welding. There's like 20 different types of welding, plasma, sonic welding, spray welding, TIG, all. And my mind was getting jumbled up. I just wanted to make two pieces fit together so I have an object and a shape. So in the same way, if I'm talking to, my warehouse team, they may or may not care about changes in deferrals or accruals. They may need to know, hey, we shipped an extra load that week or last week of the month. Why did our debt go up next month? And there's no jargon to hide behind. You need to explain, your accounts receivable terms, the payment process. You need to do it in simple ways that people understand, but be careful. I'm not talking about dumbing it down to their level. In the same way that my friend teaching me how to weld, he had to explain it simply, but he didn't treat me like an idiot. I was just a new welder. So it's that same approach. And as an industry, sometimes accountants and CFOs can be a little bookish, right? Let's just own it and say it. And you need to get out of that space and say, we're talking with people and customers and the things we do and how they impact these numbers on a spreadsheet. So those are the things you need to look for in a CFO as part of an open book team.
And you make a great point. I think it's a shared skill set. The CFO has no idea how to turn the wrench or which wrench to grab or why turning it to this much torque is important. So it's the same kind of thing. We're not trying to. We have to share each other's knowledge so that we can grow from it. So Steve, I imagine that there's specifics, there's a process, there's something technical that I need to understand or follow in order for this open book management to become a thing that I do. I'd love to know some details on that. But the flip side of that is also, I got to wrap my head around it. This is different from anything I was taught in school. This is not what I did for 20 years when I was a VP, and now I'm here and now I'm leading the company. This is a huge shift, as Vaughn said, a culture shift. What do I expect there? Is that hard? Do I get resistance? Do you deal with that? How do I lay my arms down and sort of open my heart and my mind to this?
Yeah, great question. So, and a very loaded question, I might add.
Yeah.
I loved Vaughn's example. Vaughn, when you laid it out as a welder, and the one thing that guy, you told the story in maybe 30 seconds, and I already know something about the guy. He treated you with respect.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, you know what? Imagine if you were his new hire.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to have to slow down and say, I'm not dumbing it down. I'm going to teach the basics, and here's safety. Wear your goggles and put on the gloves and do these things, because I don't even know where the bathroom is yet, right? So technically, Chris, when you think about how you're going to implement this, you start by understanding that people they retain 70% of what they learn on the job. Sit down classroom, it's somewhere around 10 to 15% retention, right? So we do a combination of formal and informal financial literacy, but people are learning by coming to the huddle every single week and being asked to forecast their numbers. So if I write lines of code, we might be focused on reducing rework, letting bad code get out. We're making sure we're doing our testing. I'm thinking about a company that we talked to yesterday, of all things. They make wire harnesses. This guy, he's just like going, I don't know, we're doing okay, but I feel like there's something missing. And as he told his story, he brought out the fact that the way they started was they just took $1 and they put it up on the wall, and they said, we have all these line items that, this is how it gets spent. And at the bottom, we have a dime. How can we get more than a dime down there? Because what they learned is everybody had ownership of one of those line items. Somebody ran maintenance. Somebody, brought spools of wire in. Somebody else put tin on the end of it. Look, I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm not in that business, but I can sure tell you if they're making money or not, because we all share only one thing. Across every culture, every government, every ideology, for profit or not, the financials, the thing that you guys help people with every single day. It's the only common language we have. Look, Chris, you don't know this. Vaughn does. I've got an art degree and I teach business. Are you kidding me? If I can learn the basic financial, I don't have to be an accountant. I don't have to be a CFO. Thank God you guys exist, because I need to keep me out of prison. You're going to help me stay between the ditches. You know what I mean? So what I need to understand is not GAAP accounting. I need to understand how money flows through the business and how I can drive more to the good causes that we have.
Chris, there's a follow-up point I'd like to make. By the way, Steve, your presentations are the prettiest we've ever seen from your artistic background. They make no sense typically, but they are very visually pleasing.
That's what I'm going for.
One point I wanted to bring up is, when you're implementing or even carrying on the weekly huddles, like Steve mentioned, we all understand you need to be consistent, needs to be supported from the top down, highlight the wins, recognition. But one thing I learned, because I did run an open book division with Springfield Remanufacturing, part of Steve's company, but also allow and encourage challenges. And they can be a bit uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. I've been in open staff meetings, and when I ran a logistics division, so we had a warehouse team and production team and guys that were really good at driving fork trucks. And when they speak up in a meeting of 40 or 50 people and ask why a load didn't go out when a product manager said it would, it can be a little uncomfortable, because product manager, has reasons, right? They typically include, they didn't get back with me, I sent an email. Do you think the guy who's, that load is encumbering the loading area in the warehouse, you think they want, again, the bottom line? So now be polite, but ensure accountability. Because if that load didn't go out, we would call him out. Or, hey, you didn't get the load out. We lost some sales, right? So ensure accountability throughout your organization. Do it polite, do it respectful, but actually encourage those uncomfortable moments, and let them savor for a little bit, right? For someone to speak up in a meeting is a big deal. Mm-hmm. And just let that echo for a minute before you just start trying to spin it. Just accept it, and it's going to be better because of it.
What I love about that, Vaughn, is that you just captured the essence of what open book management and the great game of business is about, right? Is that we can have adult discussions because we have an adult language, the language of money, the language of the financials. And because that fork truck driver could say, well, this was the impact in my department, and therefore, we're all in a shared destiny, right? The language itself allows us to take away some of the emotion, even though it's all going to be emotional at some point. Mm-hmm. Numbers are just stories about people. Mm-hmm. And so in the example, I'm just thinking about, wow, isn't it so different than just, well, I knew he wasn't going to do it. I knew they were going to blow it. Now we get no bonus. I'm going to blame it on this guy. Well, what if, who was it that said this? I think it was Deming. He said, in God we trust, everybody else bring data. Yeah. Wow. That's so much different than the old way of doing business. I love it, because now it's like, okay, let's not calm down everyone. It's really, let's look at the facts. What really happened and how can we change it in the future? Because guess what? We all still want to be here tomorrow.
You guys are touching on, for some of us, a bit of a raw nerve, which is a culture of communication, which not all of us have. A culture of honesty, of honest feedback. And this gives us a platform for maybe some new ways of thinking in that way. Vaughn, I want to touch on kind of a larger exploded view of what you were sharing. If I'm getting a lot of new data now, as Steve is talking about, or just a new way of looking at it, and I've got new voices in the room, and I've got new ideas and perspectives and questions, what's the CFO's role of making sense of all that? Is it more important than ever that there's somebody who can kind of have a big picture on this so that it doesn't get away from them? This feels like it could become unwieldy unless we have some sort of expert to say, let me put this in context, everybody.
Yeah. So I like, when you're in these, if you do a weekly cadence or monthly, but at some point you're going to be going over the books with your team, and you're going to be going over the books with a team that knows the numbers, knows what drives the numbers rather, better than you do. I ran a logistics division for 7 years. I never got on a fork truck. Right? It wasn't my role. I don't understand the intricate. I'm sure if I did, it would be a challenge for me to get a pallet off of a second level and bring it down. That would take, an hour, and they can do it in 3 minutes. So it gets back to truth and knowing the difference between things that really drive the numbers and things that don't. But for example, with the division I ran, I always like to have, and we implemented this, is have a little skunk work program, a little R&D, which you may think logistics company, you guys are able to do that. Yeah. So we developed a optical system that could identify the parts that came in and then begin to shunt them out into different bins. We never implemented it, at least while I was there, but we had the software that could do it. And the reason it was a skunk program is we bought a new computer for one of our team, and he actually used it in his garage because as he was developing this AI and optical reading technology, he was using his personal laptop, had to put it in the freezer of his garage while he was running it because it created so much heat from all the data it was processing. I said, you know what? We'll spend $2,000 or $3,000 to properly equip you. And we got to where we could actually read Matchbox cars, which one was which, and put it into a separate bin, great. Right? Skunk Works. But the team had so much fun and passion around that. And they may have developed, there are companies that, optical recognition is a lot more advanced now than where it was even, 7 or 8 years ago. But the strategic CFO should be able to come in with an eye towards, we're going to spend $3,000 to $5,000 on an initiative that I don't know if it'll work. It may just be fun for the team. It might create something. It might be something we can tout in a press release. So it's not always just about, every single pencil you can save. You're still working with people, and, they still need to feel like they're part of something. So there's a lot of nuances there that I think a strategic CFO can bring to this equation.
And Chris, if I could add something, I love that story, Vaughn, because
it's true.
A strategic CFO to me, I think the average American would think a CFO is an accountant and they're a historian and they're just, chunking out numbers and tax forms and that sort of thing. To me, I always looked at Vaughn as someone who's going to interpret the market, and they're going to be able to say, this is what I'm seeing out there, and this is the stuff I'm reading and studying, and I just came back from a conference, an association, whatever, and synthesizing that in a way to say, who are we really competing against, and what should we be ready for, and what's next? I think that's even how you started the whole podcast is that strategy is how do I bring that and not dumb it down, but make it approachable, make it understandable, because why is it that business gets to be this elite sport for the select few that keeps everybody else in the dark and out of the money? The strategic CFO should be the one bringing the light and saying, did you know if we don't spend $1 on this, like we just talked about investing, that's for the sustainability of the company, right?
Yeah.
But if we don't spend $1 on this, if you guys are better at what you do, guess what? Let's use the example of 10-cent profitability that we used earlier. Well, if you save $1, that's worth 10 in sales. Holy cow, we can really make an impact here. And yesterday, I didn't matter. My work didn't matter. I'm driving a fork truck. I'm welding. I'm writing code, whatever. Today, it matters totally different because I own it. That is fascinating.
So I do want to segue onto that, Chris, just because it's such a perfect lead into this example I was thinking of before this meeting. Again, another true story while I was running the logistics company, and from the team, because especially with Steve's business, Great Game of Business, mini games to help change behavior and improve profits is a big component of it. So one of our staff said, it looks like we're throwing a lot of good pallets away. And back in those days, a pallet was $7 or $8, and a recycled or a reman pallet was like 30% less, so $5 or $6. And we were throwing them away. And we actually had a committee, and we learned, all right, what pallets are good, because we do want to only use good pallets. So we had to learn a little bit visually, how do you identify a good pallet from a bad pallet?
You set a standard.
Yeah, set a standard. And believe it or not, because we had so much volume, we were processing at that point, ramping up to over 3 million pieces of parts a year. So we had a lot of volume, a lot of pallets. That idea quite literally saved the company, $5 or $6 at a time $100,000 a year. Now, since we're being completely honest here, it wasn't quite 100,000, but doesn't that sound a lot better than $92,342.56, right? So let's just say 100,000, because it exactly ties into Steve's analysis that we had a net margin of 10%. So now you have a financial literacy class based on someone's idea from the floor, 100,000 in savings, 10% margin, do some and spend some time with it, right? It takes a while to get that math down, and you go, okay, that's $1 million in sales, which at that time would have been one of our top 5 customers. All right, that's part of the discussion. But since we talked through all the financials, we were able to have a cash flow discussion and go, well, we're saving 100,000. We don't have any money tied up in receivables. We didn't have to go to legal and get a contract. We didn't have to hire anybody. We had no more G&A, no more overhead. It was just a perfect example of an idea coming from the floor. And I want to say a simple idea, but it should be impactful idea. Yeah, it was simple, but when I walked around our warehouse, I walked by those pallets, but I didn't see $1 million customer sitting, on those pallets. So that to me is just the value of all that tied in. And then the role of management is to suss that out and support it and recognize it. I mean, we recognized it. There were plenty of recognition with that. So anyway, I want to jump in. It was such a perfect example that segued into what Steve was saying.
I think, Steve, a lot of what we're sharing, these are kind of like catalyzers for innovation. We wouldn't have thought of it had we not, right? And is that a hallmark of open book management? Is that what I can expect? Not necessarily that I'm going to have this much savings or that much whatever, but that I might start thinking differently about innovation, that my people might start thinking differently about ownership, that morale even can change because now I'm thinking differently about the bigger picture. What are some of the, real world outcomes you've experienced from organizations that adopt this?
Well, people that understand money do better at work. And we believe if they do better at work, they do better at home. And further, if they do better at home, they do better in the community. I mean, they volunteer for things, they donate more, because plus they're living better. But I'll just tell you from my own personal experience, I've been doing this for 20 years. And it's not that I wasn't successful before, but I was completely financially illiterate by, CFO standards before I came into this, because no one ever gave me access to any information. What I knew was what I knew, and I would make decisions based on what I thought was a good idea. So yeah, innovation. I mean, to me, it's like you're unlocking motivation and engagement and innovation and all those things that people carry to work every day, but maybe they just don't feel like they should share it. I mean, when I was young, just think about me. I'm an art guy. I'm a design guy. And when you get out of art school in the 80s and you're good with people, you know what you get? You get a job in sales. That's what you get. And so I'm like, I'm learning as best I can. I'm kind of resentful. I can't be an artist and make a ton of money. The thing is, in art school, they never taught me about money or business or anything else. It was, here's the craft. And that's what we do in all of our different areas. Again, no matter what you do, great technicians will often resist learning about business because it sounds like you want me to be an accountant. Well, I will tell you this. I remember working for a wood manufacturing company, and every time that I would give an idea at a meeting, they would say, and I was already, at director of marketing or director of sales, and I was out talking to the customers and looking at the market. I would come in with an idea, and the owners of the business every single time would say, well, we did that 30 years ago. It didn't work.
Right.
And guess what? My creative mind kept getting shut down and shut down. The idea factory dried up. Now, were the ideas still happening? Yeah. I just, kept them for myself or gave them to someone else. The reality was I was just constantly being beat down. Not that they even knew they were, but what would happen if you tapped somebody? I love this story. I hadn't heard that, Vaughn, about the guy putting his computer in the freezer. How innovative is that? Yeah. And I happen to know that company that you led did create a software that today they license to the biggest OEMs on the planet for core recovery. You don't think that would have happened if you didn't have somebody shoving a computer in the freezer? I mean,
it was part of it, yeah.
but Chris, every single day I get to hear stories from some practitioner out there of some ordinary person that's doing something amazing because they had the opportunity and the guidance. Because do you think every idea I have is gold? No. But I need a lot of ideas and a way to capture and vet and prioritize those as a company, as an organization, and then have the leadership who's going to, hey, can we put some money on this? Or could we do this later? How do we put the right things first? Now, it's not a magic pill, though, Chris, because how do you get people there? It's a process, right? And so it doesn't happen overnight. And you do have to invest time and energy. And I mean, if I take my strategic CFO away from the duties that they have to maybe teach a little lunch and learn or sit down with somebody and listen to an idea, is it worth it? I mean, I just put that back to you.
There's so much, guys, we should just sit here for 2 hours and talk because
right?
There's so much more that I want to get into. So Steve, I hope that you'll come back at some point and we can kind of get into some things on in the sort of nuts and bolts in this, but this has been an eye-opening kind of introduction, I think, for a lot of us, not just about open book management, but about thinking about the things that made open book management possible. And I love these stories and these anecdotes, and also Steve, marketing pro with a music degree. So I am here for you and with you. Vaughn Henson is at ProCFOPartners.com. Steve Baker is at GreatGame.com. Such a great conversation. And Steve, thanks for jumping in with us today, sharing your expertise, your insights, your generosity with it. Such a great conversation, and looking forward to whatever we can do next.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Steve, for joining us.
Thanks for watching, and a special thanks to our subscribers. Consider becoming one today. Visit ProCFOPartners.com for more strategies and ideas for financial management and growth to help you put your business's financial picture in context.